We're back with another episode of the One Pour Problems podcast, and today I am joined by Cathy Awwad, the President and CEO of Northwest Regional Workforce Investment Board. Super excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So before we get started in every show, we'd like to talk about the drinks, and we did already taste test a little bit here, and it is very good, but tell me why this drink is significant.
So this drink I have been drinking for quite some time, but again, it's something I enjoy making. It's that end of the day, you still got to make it through the day so the espresso doesn't hurt, but it takes the edge off with the alcohol, and I really enjoy it. And I enjoy making it, and I enjoy getting a good foam on the top, and the best part of it is drinking it.
Exactly.
Yep.
So let's do that.
Very good.
Super excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
Awesome. And so for the drinks, we've had quite a few espresso martinis on the show now. However, none of them with Bailey's or, the Kirkland Special, which I'm a big fan.
Yep.
But no Bailey's and all the other ones, but you're a proponent of it.
It just sweetens it up just a little bit.
Yeah.
The espresso is important, but that little bit of sweet, and it all depends on how much Bailey's. Some folks like it a little darker, some a little lighter, but I'm a big fan of the Bailey's.
Yeah, I like it. It's very good. So for those who may not know you, I would love for you to just kind of start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and
Sure.
How you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I am right now on my third career, and when I grow up, I'll figure out what I want to be. I came to this job. It was 24 years in January. At the time, I was serving as the chief of staff to the mayor of Waterbury, and the agency over here consisted of 12 municipalities, and we were in need of some stability from a director position as we changed from one federal piece of legislation, which at the time was called the Job Partnership Training Act, to what was then in 2000 the Workforce Innovation Act. The state called and said, we really need somebody over there. At the time, I thought it would be a good move. It was the mayor's office as chief of staff is 24/7/7, and this was a little bit less than that. Yeah. So I opted to come over here and take the helm, and didn't think I'd be here 24 and a half years later, but here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So you said you're on your third career. Did your background completely tie into what got you here, or?
Not even close. I am a pharmacist by education. I'm a registered pharmacist in Connecticut, Florida, and Rhode Island.
Wow.
Was actively practicing right up until the pandemic, when I realized that this was going to be extremely busy, and so I stepped away from pharmacy at that point. But I still maintain active licenses, and actually hope to go back to it at some point.
Very cool.
Yep. And then the third career was that little stint of working in the mayor's office.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. Very cool. So tell us about the Workforce Investment Board. What is your purpose, and what's the mission that you all drive for?
So within the state of Connecticut, there are 5 workforce investment boards. Each board has certain regional nuances and industries that drive that region's economy. Here in the northwest corner, we are 41 municipalities. If you draw a little bit of a triangle, the 8 and 84 corridor, major city, Waterbury, Danbury, Torrington, Naugatuck. Then we've got the rest of the municipalities that fill in. Rural, urban, and suburban make up our mix. So it's a very interesting mix when you talk about who are the populations that you're serving, from both youth and adults, and what are the industries that you're serving. So the workforce boards really are charged with creating the opportunity for the job seekers and the employers to find their niche together, getting job seekers skilled up to meet today's employment needs, and helping employers fill their workforce needs. And then honestly, watching as the industries evolve, how do we pivot? How do we have to upskill the current employees? What's next? As you know, AI is a big thing. Right now, we're engaged in what will that look like? We all wonder what jobs will be available, what jobs will never be able to be done by AI, and how will AI impact them? So that's kind of what we're supposed to do. We are publicly funded. We do raise some philanthropic dollars. So again, funding, as you know, in the current climate is very tenuous. We're all kind of holding our breath as to what's next, but we're being prudent in planning as to how we're going to continue to effectively help both the job seeker and the employer.
Yeah. And so those who may not know, about the workforce boards, Charles IT, we've been very active in collaborating because for us, it's really trying to figure out how do we come up with a scalable model that allows us to be able to invest in training employees and, getting them geared up because right now, I would say there still is a disconnect between the educational side from high school through college and then stepping into the workforce where like they're learning things that may not be completely transferable to get right into a job. And I know that's where you guys come in. You have these training programs.
You make a really valid point because when we took a group of manufacturers up to the University of Connecticut Storrs campus where they have an amazing building, the IPB building, and it's designed to help industry solve their problems with the help of students. But one of the things we heard from the industry that was up there was that when UConn graduates an engineer, that engineer has book learning. They don't have the practical experience. So how can we help create a co-op program, or an internship program where the candidate has hands-on experience solving the real world problems, not doing a problem in a textbook. So those are really important. And from our youth programs right up into our adult programs and even our senior community service programs, it's how do we provide exposure to the real world that they're going to be asked to do once their training is finished. And that's really the unique piece. And that's where really the job seeker and the employer come together to address their mutual needs.
Yeah, I love that because it's exactly, I would say, when I joined Charles IT about 8 years ago, I came in and one of the hats of the many that I was wearing at the time was HR. And so I was responsible for the recruiting and finding, all of these technicians. And it's a pretty difficult role to fill. And in the managed services space, we are very fast paced. You're working on a ton of different environments. And so the skill set is different. And at the time, I started to work with a bunch of the different workforce boards to figure out, hey, is there a program or something that we can put together that allows us to be able to, what I was referring to as create like a farm system where I could train and help get these job seekers certifications that are relevant in the space, and then also help us continue to hire and bring on people into the organization. And we worked through a bunch of different programs, whether it was like WIOA, it was the incumbent worker, it was the IT Express, like there was so many different programs.
And then there was the federal tech hire program that was unique to information technology that we were very fortunate to be one of 25 in the nation that got awarded that grant. So again, to your point, and you call it a farm team, we call it a pipeline in the workforce world. But it's how do you create that continuum of folks on a career ladder or a career lattice to get them into the niche within an industry sector that they're interested in.
Yeah. So, are you guys, are you working through any relationships that help kind of foster the actual like public side, the private sector, and then also like what you're training, like how does that collaboration work?
So the workforce boards the board itself has to be a majority private sector. So we have a number of private sector business folks that have been recruited to serve on the board to help provide direction as to what are the programs we should be developing, where do we need to pivot, what's next, so to speak. So we are private sector led. We have a number of committees, but honestly, it's the impact of the industry, the executives in the industries sharing their needs. We have about 3 years ago, launched regional sector partnerships. We've got a great one in manufacturing, healthcare, and in the last year, we've launched one in the area of architecture, engineering, and construction, because those three trades go hand in hand. We've got some really big success there because they're industry-led. I don't know what a construction industry needs. I know how to help them get what they need. And so that's where it's really important that we put on our listening ears to understand what industry needs, and then we put together the partners to support their needs, such as the community college system, the K-12 system, the proprietary training programs, the unions. How do we create, that OJ on-the-job training opportunities? And that's really the mission of the workforce boards. And again, starting in the middle school, exposing students to career pathways, having speakers come in and talk to kids about, I was in banking, and I started in the mailroom, and now I'm the CEO, things like that. So it's really all about awareness and moving people through.
Yeah. And so, I did spend a little bit of time working, for the state of Connecticut and understanding like how some of like the policies and procedures work and a little bit of the red tape that you have to kind of navigate.
A little bit of red tape.
A little bit
more than a little bit.
But going through that, one of the things that, I came out of that was like, I understand how to navigate a little bit differently. But I think that's one of the biggest things that organizations like ours need to be able to communicate with organizations like yours to say like, hey, I would love to do the OJT or there was the internship program, I forget the name of it, but we go work through those things. But the problem is like we end up getting buried in paperwork.
Yep.
And then we're just handing you a bunch of paperwork to be buried in. And it's like, how do we start to form these relationships where it could be a little bit more loose, but still follow all the proper guidelines?
Well, one of the things we try to do to help industry is to kind of get a lot of that paperwork done ahead of time. So we're here to support them in getting the paperwork done, filling out the forms. There are certain things we can't do, but we do everything we can to expedite that for them. That really is one of our most important employer services, is helping get through that documentation that has to be created to really get to the point where the employer can then bring somebody on and help that employee turn into the employee that employer needs them to be. It's better for both of them, and and we'll help you with the paperwork. Mm-hmm. So that's really important, and we try to do a really good job at that. Again, regulatory compliance is very important. We are federally funded. We are heavily regulated and routinely monitored. Mm-hmm. So, we're very careful. I mean, we have, and I'll knock on the table, been very good at being in compliance with everything we need to do.
Yeah.
But helping the employer do that same level of compliance without burdening them with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So in your time here, right, 24 years,
mm-hmm.
How has your vision for where the direction of the organization is going changed over time?
So one of the things that I like to think that I have the ability to do is kind of see the big picture, to know what our finances can allow from our program side, and to kind of see how we're going to have to pivot. The big pivot right now, to your point, like in this moment, it's AI, as I alluded to in the beginning. Like, how is AI going to impact us? And so really learning myself how to use AI. How do we use ChatGPT? How do we use, there's a product out there called HyperWrite that helps you write. I mean, it's the content and how do you develop that. So I think for us, it's really about educating yourself, staying on top of, we serve all industries, so there's a lot. We have a great team here. I've got some excellent people here that support the work that we do. Right now, I've got a team of people reading through that big, beautiful bill to figure out how that's going to impact us. Yep. And so again, there's so many ways you have to stay up to be able to be helpful, mm-hmm. that it's pivoted. But when you look back years ago, it was for your dad and my dad, they came out of high school. If they went to college or a trade school, they got a job, and the likelihood was they stayed with that company until they retired. Mm-hmm. We're here in Waterbury, which was the brass capital of the world at one point. Your grandfather was working at Scoville's, and then your father worked at Scoville's, and your mother probably worked at Scoville's, or your grandmother, and you were expected to go to work at Scoville's. And then that changed. And so how did we pivot to the change? There became subcontractors, there became the supply chain. And those are things of, how did you pivot to that? How did you help the supply chain happen? What did that look like? And then things went overseas, and how do we look to bring them back? So it's really a complex, mm-hmm. I'm probably making it sound more complex than it is, but there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, speaks to, you as a leader having to come up with what it looks like in the future, because you have a team of people here, right, that they're out there executing on the vision, mm-hmm. but they're not thinking about the same things that you're thinking about, that you're like, hey, this entire industry is going to pivot away from this direct labor to subcontracting. Mm-hmm. And, you have to kind of see the forest from the trees.
Yep.
And, it's it's definitely changing at an even more rapid pace now.
And, lifelong learning is really important because back then that was the technology and that was all you did. Now, reading a great book that is this kids born today, their jobs haven't even been invented yet.
Yeah.
We have no idea. And who knows, your job may very much change and you may find yourself doing something completely the other end of the spectrum before and then the book that I'm reading also talks about how as our lifespan has continued to evolve, it's anticipated that right now people that are being born could live up to be 150 years old. And so their work life could be between 70, 80 years. And I'm calling a halt to that. I'm not working for 80 years. I'm just not doing it. So
150.
Right. They're predicting lifespans of 150 with a work life of 70 to 80 years. So interesting concept,
That's
right?
some serious production there.
Yeah. So some serious work.
Yeah, seriously. So, you were talking about AI, and a lot of people, when they hear AI, they just think in the technology space, right?
It's everywhere.
But it's everywhere. So, that you work with, 41 different municipalities and in all different locations with all different needs and different sectors.
Yep.
How do you start to come up with a plan for how we tackle AI across all of those groups?
So I think really this is where it's important that we come together as workforce leaders. I was recently in Tampa with my colleagues from across the United States, Boston, Philadelphia, Austin, Texas, Los Angeles. I mean, we're all grappling with it. And so it's really good to have those shared conversations about what are they doing in Phoenix and what are we doing in Charlotte, North Carolina, and how is Triangle Park down there thinking about it. And so it's sharing that mindset and then bringing it home, sharing it with the staff here. And then really I think we're all going to learn AI together. I think some people are farther out ahead of us. I have staff here that's way ahead of me in using it. But again, I think it's how people have learned to do it and whether or not, not whether or not, but what is the impact of AI on our energy resources and what does that look like? These are all really questions that we're going to have to come to some conclusion about as to where we're going to go.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing on the AI side is a lot of individuals just don't know where to start, and so they don't. And I even find myself, thinking about it. I was talking to someone the other day, and I asked a question. It was about the tonneau cover on a truck. And I was like, is there one on this? I was like, because it was automatic. And he was like, I don't know. He was like, let me Google it. And I was like, Google it? I was like, people say that still?
Yeah,
because
they
I was
do.
like, we're talking about AI and ChatGPT. And, this morning I'm having a conversation with my wife about like summer vacation because my oldest daughter's about to go into school. And she's like, this is our last chance. And I'm like, she's going to have summers off. What are we talking about? But either way, she wanted to go on this vacation. And I went into ChatGPT and I was like, plan me a trip from these dates for this type of activities and location and all this stuff. And it was able to basically be my full-fledged travel advisor and came up with links for everything, times, dates, prices, like comparisons, like everything.
So where are you going?
Somewhere in South Carolina.
Okay.
That's what
Nice.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
But it's cool that you can like use that technology for even things like that, right? Because it doesn't have to be like it's going to make me better at my job every day, right? It might take things that burden you outside of work that reduce your stress load that make you more effective when you go to work, right? So there's so many other different ways that it can impact
I think
us.
you've hit the nail there in terms of how does it improve your productivity in the workplace. From a manufacturing line where you've put in repeated run times to see how you can get a better efficiency, and we're working on that right now, to how do you use it in your finance department to help with some calculations and catch errors, or how do you utilize it in creating regulatory compliance documents. So it's got so many functions. It's how do we use it and who's going to be responsible for developing it, and then what's the proprietary nature of the product. And, we did come up with a policy here in the office that if you're going to use it to develop content, you have to tell me where the source came from. Because if we're going to put something out there, I got to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
So I think
sense.
that these are things that people have to consider.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, just as an aside, so we all use Zoom or Teams, and you've got this little reader that comes in there and likes to pay attention to your meetings.
Yeah.
Well, for those of us in the federal world, that becomes an FOI-able document. So we don't let anybody use their readers, those types of
The
note takers, unless we approve it,
Yeah.
because that becomes an FOIable document. So these
Yeah.
are things that you have to consider.
Yeah, yeah. Again, there's so many different factors, right?
Yep.
That's not even something that I was thinking about, but it makes sense that
Yep.
it would be. So, yeah, I say as far as like the rapid, changes in technology in your world, you're having to come up with ways to future-proof the skill set of the people that are coming in the door looking for jobs. What are some of the things that you're doing to help allow those candidates, stay ahead of the curve so that they're more successful in the job?
So really, it is about incumbent worker training and making sure that you're working with the employer to know what's next. So they're going to bring in a new machine. And so what's the technology and how do we begin to train now for that new machine to get ready to take over?
Yep.
And, continuing that continuous lifelong learning is really important. I think though you can't really future-proof a job because it's always evolving. I think that really we just have to make sure that we've put the systems in place to have that lifelong learning. And that's going to be the key.
Yeah, and so I love where you're going back to the collaborating with industry. And so in the industry, how are you fostering those relationships, right?
Through
how
the
are you-
sector partnerships, by inviting industry, by saying to industry, you come sit at the table, we're going to sit behind you and listen to your conversations, tell us what you need, and we'll help you figure out how to get there. So this is really what our regional sector partnerships are about. They are industry led. And if you look at the diagram, it's industry at the table, and then around it in the chairs along the wall are those of us from the public and core teams that we call them, the community support partners. And that's really the most important part is, as I said before, we have to listen to industry and work together to respond to what they see as going to be their needs. I can't tell a manufacturer what he's going to need. Teachers in the high school, we're talking earlier today about creating opportunity for our teachers to get into the workspace to see what their students are going to be considering for careers. You can't espouse something to which you do not know. So if we teach the teacher about what manufacturing looks like, what are the advances in healthcare treatments, what does it look like in retail, they can go back to the classroom and say, geez, I didn't know this, you guys should check this out. So it's really about how do we create that conversation.
I love the idea of that. But now let me ask a pointed question. If I'm in the industry and I may be skeptical, saying I'm going to spend some time, I'm going to tell you what I think, and then nothing's going to happen.
Well,
What do you say to
you're
that?
not unusual because that's what most of them have been thinking
Yeah.
because of the way we used to do it, which is why we flipped it now and we call it a next generation sector partnership, because the next generation was that, okay, industry's going to do the talking, we're going to do the listening. And we're 3 years into it, almost 4 years into it, and the buy-in is really good because they had to see it to believe it. We proved that we were listening by responding appropriately, and these partnerships continue to grow.
I love that. Yeah, because again, that's what it's about. I think a lot of the industry side look at it as I'm taking time away from my business and the productivity and all of that to try to help something that may never happen. But I think the proof is in the pudding, and the more that you can show we are going to deliver and execute on these initiatives that we're putting in place, it definitely gives you more buy-in.
And we make sure that industry is deciding when the meeting is. You let us know what's a good time for you. We don't say, oh, well, the meeting is tomorrow at 9. We know that that's not going to work for them. So when do you want to meet? And then we make sure we're flexible to be there when they can be there. And then, sometimes it's in the evening for a dinner meeting, or it's early in the morning before the workday, so that we're not impacting their business cycle.
That's great. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about people gaining entry into the workforce. But that's just one subsection of employment, right? Is your first job.
Yep.
Or getting back into a job after a career change or something like that. But how are the workforce boards helping in transitioning from job seeking to career building and longevity?
So first of all, back in the day, we would call it common sense, and today they call it work readiness. So be on time, put down your cell phone. If you're not going to be able to get to work, please call and let us know. Just don't show up. And because the sun is shining and it's hot today, that doesn't mean you get to go to the beach and not go to work. So there's all of that reacclimation and resetting of expectations as to what is the workplace norms for work readiness skills.
Why do you think that's the case?
I don't know.
Those damn Gen Zs, you know?
I'm not going to blame any one generation. I think every one of us parents wants better for our kids than we had ourselves, right? But what does that mean? Does that mean we're coddling them or we're insulating them from what their real responsibilities are? So I think we have to look at ourselves first, but then also try to help each other to the point where, yes, today we're going to have a 4-hour class and the class starts at 9. And if you get here at 9:02, you're not in the class because the class started at 9. And that's how we begin to develop those skills. And it's been successful, even with our youth. Financial literacy is a whole nother thing. You know, kids don't understand how important a credit score is or why it even matters. So we try to put that, and that's not just for kids, that's adults too. Like, it's really important to understand, you know, every bank has the responsibility to the community to have some type of access to a banking plan. So there's free banking available. People don't know about it. How do we help spread that word? So how do we create that whole training module that talks about work readiness, financial literacy, and then really the hard skill. There's the soft skills and the hard skills. And so it's our job to kind of put that all together.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is taking that script and flipping it and saying that it's not just your responsibility, right? Coming to the industry and saying, hey, we expect you guys to continue to double down on these things. And a good example is like our organization, we spend a lot of time on personal development. So outside of your career planning and growing and certifications and moving up, all that kind of stuff, we spend a lot of time focused on like, whether it's we bring in a nutritionist, or I've spent a bunch of time, my background's in accounting. I spent a lot of time on helping people like properly budget and plan their finances and that kind of stuff. But we're providing those as a organization for our team to help them live, you know, a more fulfilled and you know, sustainable life.
Yep.
And I think, you know, it's interesting to ask the question, say like, is that something that you guys push onto the industry and say, hey, you should continue to do these things because it helps with longevity?
To a degree we do, but I think for us, it's very difficult to instill in an industry that they have a social responsibility. To an extent, they do. We want them to provide that employee with a good job. And by a good job, we mean stable work schedule, good pay, good benefits, you know, the support systems that they would need, healthcare, mental health care, things that, you know, back in the day when nobody ever talked about. Now it's being talked about, and time off. You know, everybody needs a little break now and then. And so how do we instill industry and do that? So I think there's a very fine balance to what you're talking about. I do think we encourage industry to consider the well-being of their workforce, because if they don't, that workforce isn't going to last.
Yeah.
So I think there's a very good balance that has to be struck.
Yeah, and I think especially now, because I've seen, you know, even in, you know, working at Charles IT, I've seen a bunch of different types of individuals come through the organization and what their priorities are. And, you know, when I joined, we were relatively new, like startup size, but we've been in business for, you know, 10 plus years at that time. But we had everybody in there was like in their 20s, right? And so things that are happening in your life in your 20s are very different than what's happening in your 30s or in your 40s or your 50s, right? Like it's a very different like spectrum of employee. And, you know, one of the biggest things we had to do was really come up with different ways to engage with those employees. And kind of, I was talking with Chris Stephen-Timo from CBIA, who was like, you got to meet them where they are.
Yeah, you just took the words right out of my mouth, because to an extent you do. You have to meet them where they are and get them to where you need them to be. Yeah. So it's, what does that dynamic look like?
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
So if you're going to be, you know, looking to match, you know, specific people that are coming into your program, right? And so we just talked about the different ages and employees and that kind of stuff, and that's one factor. But, you know, how has matching talent to the industry, like how's those needs changed over time?
I think the biggest change is the fact that there's such a gap right now in what industry needs and what the skill sets that are available. So there's the skills gap that we really have to address. I think we also need to address the skills gap by saying, okay, just how can we get this skill through actual training in the employer space, or does it require some other type of education? When you look at skills-based hiring is a big thing now, right? Mm-hmm. Can we hire somebody based on what skill they have as opposed to what degree they have or what credential they have? The stackable credentials where you're increasing someone's skill set over time as opposed to putting someone into a 4-year degree where they didn't really gain a skill, but they have the inherent knowledge technically to do the job, but not the functionality of actually delivering the skill set in a workplace. So I think that's really something that we've got to strike a balance to and understand what skill-based hiring is and encourage employers to look at that. You know, if you've got someone who's been doing the job and you're going to upskill them, then they continue to grow, as opposed to posting a job that says, well, you need a 4-year degree to even get your foot in the door. Mm-hmm. Who do you want? Do you want somebody that's never done the job but has the 4-year degree, or the person that's been there for the last 7, 8 years, has the skill set, and you'd like to move them up? So that's really an employer. You have to educate the employer about what that is.
Yeah. And what about on the personality side, right? Like, how does that play a factor, right? Because culture's become a huge thing in a lot of organizations. And, you know, we saw a little bit of a shift from COVID, but now you're seeing the shift back of like a lot of people coming back into the office or being required to be in the office. Charles IT, we never left the office. So we've always been in-house, but, you know, how is the personality of the candidate, playing a factor in some of those hiring decisions?
So I think for us here, we left the office when we were mandated to leave the office. We left the office, I think it was March 26th, and we were back the first week in June. We were back the first week in June on staggered shifts. Mm-hmm. I couldn't call them the A and B team because, I'm not on the A team. So we called them the X's and O's. We played tic-tac-toe, and who was on the X team and who was on the O team. And in the off days, we deep cleaned. I mean, we pivoted, right? We adapted. Yeah. And I think the same thing has to be true. How do we pivot and adapt to help folks? Though the remote or hybrid employment, people got used to it. There's arguments to both sides of the coin about productivity. Okay, I work great when I'm in the office. I actually get more done when I'm at home because there's less interruptions. Of course, I live alone. I don't have anybody disturbing me, whereas here, it's not that disturbing, but there's, the daily...
They want to talk to you.
Well, it's, hey, what about this? Or hey, what about that? So that's a personal style to a degree, but to keep people employed, we've discovered throughout many industries where you can, that one work from home day might be the key to keeping that employee. So there's, again, within each industry, what's available. You certainly can't work from home if you're working construction, right? You can't work from home if you're working on manufacturing. But where you can, how does that work? And what's the pivot? You talk about scheduling. The companies that are running 12-hour shifts for 4 days in a row, they're probably having a harder time hiring than a company that's running five days a week, 8-hour shifts, because there's a quality of life factor involved in that, right? Mm-hmm. And so what changes does industry have to make to get a workforce, and what is someone that's a job seeker looking for? Hey, I'd rather go do it in 4 12-hour days and have 3 days off. Or I would like to get home for dinner with my kids. Mm-hmm. I would rather work the 5 days a week, and if I want the overtime, I'll take it. So these are things that really we can't legislate, but we can help navigate.
Yeah, and I love the perspective, because the more we're opening up this conversation, it's more collaboration like that is needed at the end of the day. We need to know what you're hearing from the candidate side, and then you need to hear what we're having from the industry side. Correct. And then we have to come up with a way of like, this is how we're going to navigate it together, because I don't think there is one size fits all. And I think especially industry driven, maybe even location driven, where it may be more difficult to travel into certain parts of the state and that kind of stuff.
Well, up in the northwest corner, you have the world's largest syringe maker, BD, is up in the northwest corner. It's very difficult to get there. So for us to try to solve for transportation solutions, we tried to figure out how to solve using Uber and Lyft. Well, there's not a lot of connectivity up there, so it's very difficult. But again, as we grow and figure out, and we've put in more, IT hubs and trying to do that, we could resolve that. But again, transportation is a problem. What are the logistical barriers for an industry, and what are the barriers for the job seeker? Childcare. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we have to overcome to get somebody to work on a daily basis.
Yeah, and those are all things that employers need to be thinking about. A quick story about it is the reason I'm at Charles IT is specifically because of childcare. And what I mean by that is I ended up in an interview talking with Foster, the CEO, and at the time he was having his first daughter. And he was like, I want to do something for the team because we're all getting to the age of we're about to have kids. And he was like, I want to be able to do something for our team. So he was like, that's something that you would take on. What would you do? And I was like, I was an auditor. Like, I don't know. I would figure it out though.
Yeah.
And then I ended up going home, called a bunch of daycares to figure out the price of slots to put kids in a daycare.
Yep.
Figured out what you can put into an FSA account for your team. And then also rough estimate of what it would take to build out the second floor of our office
To be a daycare.
Yep. And then I emailed that to him, and that's what got me the job.
Yep.
And it's the figuring those things out
Right.
and coming up with these creative solutions that one got me a job, but two are the things that employers need to be thinking about as the workforce continues to develop.
It's all about problem solving, and these are the critical thinking skills that we try to get kids to really embrace in the middle school, high school. Really, critical thinking and problem solving is probably one of the two biggest skills that an employer is looking for. They can teach you the rote mechanics of a job, but they want you to think for yourself and be able to problem solve, be a team member, and be able to work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keys, big keys.
So, I'm going to go back to the 24-year career here. There's definitely been trials and tribulations that you've gone through. What would you say is one of the best success stories, of your time, being part of the Workforce Board?
I think really the work that we were able to effectuate during the pandemic, then we started these regional sector partnerships in August of 21. And so to stand something up on a bunch of Zoom meetings where industry bought in and then pivot to the in-person meetings and get the buy-in, I think that was something that really kind of transformed how we interacted with industry, and it's been very effective. We go back, I've been here a long time, probably too long, but 2008 was the crash. And so we had ERA, and now we had the pandemic and we have ARPA. The acronyms. I think for me personally, the alphabet soup is a whole nother story. I have a handbook that I give to board members. Oh, by the way, when we start talking in acronyms, good luck, try to keep up. But, I think that those are the things that have developed. I am really proud of the staff that we have here. People have come to us for different reasons, seeking different outcomes. Our chief operating officer, we met early, Jenny Fonseca. Jenny and I met behind a pharmacy counter. She was the pharmacy tech and I was the pharmacist. I worked nights for CVS after I'd leave here, put the kids through college. And so she was great young lady. I think at the time she was 19. Fun fact, Jenny's car only took right-hand turns. So try to figure out how to get her home every night. It was, and Jenny was recently named to 40 under 40 from the Hartford Business Journal. And she said, boss, I don't know. They want a fun fact. I said, it's the car that only took right-hand turns.
I love that.
But Jenny, we needed some more help here. And I said, would you like to come work for us? And she's like, really? And I said, yeah. So she came in 15 years ago as an administrative aide, worked her way up, director of strategic planning, ran some programs for us, got her feet wet on that side of it. And now she's our chief operating officer. So that's a personal story for me where somebody's life was changed for the better. We've had all kinds of other stories like that where people have come in and grown in the job, and then some have left. Had the opportunity to put people in a position where they were ready to spread their wings and leave and go on to bigger and better things, and we're very proud of that.
Yeah, honestly, I love the story because, as someone who it's 2023, I was one of the 40 under 40 in Connecticut, and hearing it from you as her boss, saying one of my proudest accomplishments and
really
moments
Yep.
is that she was able to get to this level, and that recognition is a really, really cool thing from a leadership perspective.
Yep. I'm really proud of her.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, there's there's a lot of things that your organization can do. But at the end of the day, everyone that comes to work wants to be there for a purpose, right? They want to feel appreciated. They want to know that what they're doing is making a difference, and
that they're important and that they're valued in the workplace.
Exactly.
It's really important to me. You know, we've got a great team here. Our not new, but Patrick Donnelly joined our team a few years ago. He's now the director of strategic planning. Has done great things for us. Steve Gray came in He came in about 14 or 15 years ago, running a program. Now he's the director of workforce programming. He sees the whole operation. So the career growth in our own agency is something that I'm really proud of, and how people have bought into the culture that's here. You know, we have phones with intercoms that I don't use. I just holler out of my office, and it's, you know, it's part of the charm.
Yeah.
And so it creates a camaraderie in the workplace that people have to be here a lot. Yep. They're here for a long time every day. And so let's create an environment where they feel valued, they're appreciated for the work that they do, and they see the product of our work as an agency. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that is great perspective to have. And I think anyone that's looking to step into a leadership role should take notes from that. And so, you know, having us be able to say, like, you should be, you know, making sure that some of your most proud moments as a leader are things that others accomplish rather than yourself.
Yeah.
It speaks a lot to the character. So I love that perspective. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
So as we transition towards the end of the episode here, I'm curious to hear, you know, really, I would say 2 statements to live by. You know, if I'm a candidate looking to, you know, make my mark and get into the workplace, you know, what's, you know, a word of advice, something that they should be thinking about. And then on the flip side, if I'm a industry partner that is looking to engage, what is the right way, the best thing that I should do to engage with the workforce?
Well, I think the answer is the same for both sides. I think it's really about being open and honest with your expectations and what your abilities are. What do you expect from the individual as an employer, and what can you deliver as the employee? Just be real. If you don't know something, let me get back to you. If you know it, speak your mind. And if you know it and you don't think they're appreciating your value, your insight, say, no, I'm not kidding. I'm going to really double down on this. And, you know, in my world of work, I think that, you know, I try to educate myself about where we are, and I'm able to speak to it with a relative ease because I've done my research. And I would just say I'm upfront, and for a job seeker and an employer, being open and honest, I think, is the most important piece. Don't misrepresent who you are or what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for all the perspective today and for the drink.
You're welcome.
I'm making a mark on it. You got to get going.
I gotta go babysit. My next job is to go take care of my 1-year-old granddaughter, and I can't wait to get there.
The 4th career. I love it. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you and your crew. And again, wanted to just thank my staff for reaching out to you guys. They saw you, they heard about you, and here we are. So
love it.
Kudos to Amy. Thank you.
Yeah.